Hey nerds, in this live stream we do a review and some of the breakdown and discussion of Loki Season 2, Episode 2, titled Breaking Brad. It's written by Eric Martin and directed by Dan Deleeuw, starting now. Welcome to the Nerd Social. I am Colin.
And I'm Nathan.
Okay, so this is now episode 2 of Loki Season 2, and the spoiler free log line is that with the TVA on the verge of temporal meltdown, Loki and Mobius will stop at nothing to find Sylvie. So, Nathan, what did you think of this episode here called Breaking Brad?
Uh, it was fun. It was a little jarring because I feel like, and a lot of people have been complaining about this, that like you're thrown into um the next like thing without like a bridge scene explaining why they're on this next thing. Like at the end of the last episode, we saw Docs and X5 leaving with all these charges, and they were like, "Oh, all of this is for Sylvie." And of course, we find out what those were for in this episode. But that's how it ended in the last episode. Um, and they have this ADR line at the beginning of the episode that kind of explains where we are at the beginning of this episode. But there's I feel like there's a little bit of a jarring gap. But besides that, kind of throwing us into the mix. I thought it was a pretty good episode. It was fun. We get to understand a little bit more about some of the characters that have been introduced this year, or sorry, not this season. And they get a bit more to do in this episode. Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston, of course, are always great in this show, and their chemistry together is always fun to watch. Um, and Sylvie, I forget the name of the actress who plays Sylvie.
Sophie De Martino.
Sophie
De
Dottir,
Martino. Yeah.
She does a good job as well in this episode. She showed up a little bit at the end of the last episode. But yeah, she it was a fun episode. I have some quibbles, but with how it started, but otherwise, I think it was a good episode.
Yeah, I think that for me, it definitely was a good episode as well. I think it was pretty solid, based on the good start that it had last week. This week is definitely, I would say, a little bit weaker, but at the same time, it was different from what you saw last week. I think that there are definitely some really good performances. There's some really good interplay between Brad and Loki and Mobius, and also definitely some good interactions between Mobius and Loki. I think they're definitely kind of build off of their first season in a lot of ways. So, and also the side characters really have much more depth. I think that from the first episode, we had Hunter B-15 having such a lot of enormous depth. Casey as well had a lot of enormous depth. So they kind of carried over a little bit. They were a little less emphasized in this one. Kind of focused more on the dialogue between Sylvie and Loki a lot more. But in any case, I think that there definitely was some good points, some high points, and then there's definitely some slow parts. But I think overall it was still pretty solid in terms of a second episode. And again, it leads to kind of more questions as it's supposed to, and it's not kind of like, I think that comparatively speaking to other episodes that we've seen, other Disney Plus series, this does not drag. This just kind of keeps the plot moving, and it keeps getting it interesting. So I think in terms of that, it's definitely something that people should keep watching, even though in some circles of the internet they're saying that, oh, it's not as good as the first season. But I think I say overall it's been pretty good so far. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to think back to see to make a determination about whether or not it was as good as the first season. These two episodes, I think it's different. I didn't mention in my little blurb there that the characters, like you said, Casey and Ouroboros and Hunter B-15, they don't have as much to do in this episode, but they still are there, and they're doing a great job as well. You're saying the pace is is moving. And I think that's true, except for, I mean, but I don't think the pace is as fast as in the first episode. I think that they did slow down from time to time, especially to let the relationship between Loki and Mobius breathe a little bit. They actually had a very silent, not silent, but like intimate like conversation in the middle of like, you know, the frustration and the hustle and bustle. Yeah, and I appreciate that. The pacing on this is a little bit slower than the first episode.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So in terms of that, what do you think of a rating for this episode here?
I think I don't think I do think I don't like it as good as as much as the first episode, but it's not so much worse that I would like downgrade it from like the 7 that I gave last week to a 6. I think I'd give it a 7 as well. Dinner Party.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, consistency wise, it's probably, I think last week I gave the first episode an 8. I didn't want to actually rate it that high because I didn't know what else to expect. Because of Ouroboros, the appearance of Ouroboros. I think that it still holds up pretty well, so I would still stick with an 8, even though there were still some slow parts to it. But I say it's still pretty good. I mean, there's some nice scenes in it, some nice smaller scenes and slower scenes, but overall still pretty solid in terms of the overall series. Any other things before we get into spoilers?
No, it's difficult to talk about this one because there are some new developments that with new characters that are difficult to talk about without spoiling it. So we should get into it.
Okay, so if you like our conversation, please like, share, and subscribe. For more content like this, and so we can keep YouTube happy and the algorithm happy. And so, without further ado, spoilers ahead. Okay, so let's look at let's got some screenshots here. So we start off with this is a very interesting scene, and I think the internet kind of picked it up really quickly. That right behind them is Kingo from Eternals. Actually, is one of his movie posters. So so good job by the internet to kind of pick that up. A lot of people kind of found that.
I feel like they have to like revise the all the movies that they have or the flashbacks that they have in the past now to put Kango what you call it posters. We didn't get any Kango posters in the first Avengers because of course that movie wasn't created yet. But they should do a special release just to have Kango posters in the background so it's consistent with him being on the planet for so long. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
So we find in the second episode, we find that Mobius and Loki went through a time portal, time door, and ended up in 1977 London. They're trying to track down one of the hunters here, who is very interesting character that you'll get to kind of see throughout the episode. And again, it's kind of like a very good kind of change of pace from. And kind of like the offbeat nature of the kind of like the more bureaucratic TVA, and then they're going into these different worlds. You know, last year we saw that they were. I mean, the season 1 we saw that they were in different types of worlds. I think that they kind of really expanded it even more so than in season 1. So it's kind of interesting to kind of let them be very creative about the different locations that they're going to see. So I really enjoyed that a lot. There.
Yeah, this is also, like I said, where they kind of just throw us into the thing because this is definitely not where we left off at the last season. The last episode. They just happened to be in London. There was no like bridge explaining why they were in London, so they actually had to explain it at the beginning of this thing. And like I said, and a line that seemed to be ADR because you didn't see Owen Wilson's mouth moving when he was like, "Oh, this is the last time we he said something to the effect, "Is this the last time X5 showed up on our scopes?" And he was the one that was looking for Sylvie.
Right.
Now you don't see him say that; you just see the back of his head as they're walking, and they say that. So I think they just added that so that people weren't confused because this is not where we left off in the last episode.
Right, and also they did mention that this was the sacred timeline, so it's the main timeline that they're on. So because we saw from the last episode where everything kind of branched off, and it was kind of total chaos, and so they're actually on the sacred timeline.
and Sylvie herself was actually on a branch timeline
Right.
at the end of the last episode as well. So
Right.
yeah.
Right. So we get to see kind of the confrontation. There was a big kind of kind of a meetup scene between Brad Wolf, who is Hunter X05. So he's kind of portraying as an actor here, like a very famous actor, and it's kind of like an awards night ceremony. And so
I think it's
yeah,
the premiere.
yeah,
So the sense that I got was that this was his life before. Like this was his life, and he became a variant, and that's why he wants to go back to his life as an actor.
hmm
But yeah, it's interesting that that he did that. Yeah.
So they kind of exchanged some pleasantries in the main entrance, and then basically, Brad tried to escape from both Loki, and there was a big night kind of nice chase scene. It kind of reminded me a lot of his kind of like Tom Hiddleston's audition for James Bond in some ways, because I was like, oh, this looks kind of like James Bondish. It's like, let's see, I wonder if he's really trying to score that role there, because there's been rumors about that.
I have not seen. I thought you were referring to like some video that has been online, because there's definitely video of him trying to audition for Thor.
Right.
Which is funny to look at.
That is true, but I think that it kind of reminded me of like kind of secret agent type of thing going there, the vibe and all that. So it was really interesting to kind of see, because there's been rumors that they want him as Bond. And of course, there's other people that are rumored as well. So this is where they kind of confront Brad, and so it was very interesting in a lot of ways where he started, you see kind of like the illusion of Loki, and then kind of like playing around with Brad. We kind of didn't really see this a lot since we didn't really see this in season one. We saw this back in the movies a lot, but not so much in the
He did a little bit of magic in season one when he wasn't. So his magic doesn't work in the TVA. But when he was out with Sylvie, he did some magic on that. You know, that planet where they were stuck.
Oh yeah, yeah,
He
yeah.
did some telekinesis. He moved a building. He did some illusion stuff. Like his illusions are usually like you're making a dagger appear and stuff like that. So he did a little bit in season one, but in general, he was inside the TVA. So he couldn't do a lot of magic. Or when he was on the Sacred Timeline, he was only there for a short period of time. It was only when he was on that planet that was going to be destroyed, when he found Sylvie, that he used some magic, because they had that train ride and everything. So yeah, they
Right.
when they bonded. But yeah, in general, he didn't use his powers as much as he did. We've seen him use in the past.
Yeah, so I mean, this kind of remind me of like his Avengers scene from 2012, and also this specifically right here. When he corners Brad, he's kind of like he shows the horns and stuff like that. It kind of again reminds me of Avengers, from the 2012 movie. So and then so they basically captured him. They take him back to the TVA, and they bring him in. They bring in Ouroboros as well. Ouroboros does not kind of have a very big role in this episode, but he's kind of like trying to figure out a way to stabilize the loom. Yeah, the loom.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like his preoccupation during this episode. Yeah. So you can see here, this is where he gets detained. And I kind of like the interplay between the three, and he kind of, I mean, Brad really lays it on to Mobius, to a point where Mobius was like really upset. I mean, that was kind of like uncharacteristic.
Not just Mobius, but he starts in on Loki though. He's like, stop. He's like, he's basically saying, let's stop playing games. We know that you're a villain. And Loki gets really close, and he's like, yeah, you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe I am a villain. Maybe I do. Like he says that. I think he says that something to effect, people are going to get hurt, and then Brad scoffs at him. He's like, people are going to get hurt. Look who's saying that, and then kind of lays into Loki, and Mobius pulls him back, and then, like you said, he lays into Mobius about being a nothing person until he goes and reclaims his life, and then he's the one who actually ends up hitting him. So it's interesting. This is also where we get the little beat where they actually slow down and they have a
Mm-hmm.
conversation. They have a conversation with the key lime pie after
Yeah, we'll
Mobius
get to that.
after Mobius blows up. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
we'll definitely get to that part. But even before this part, there was a part where they kind of establish the relationship between Renslayer and he who remains, and so there was a little brief kind of like interaction there, to kind of, okay, we find out they're kind of an item in some ways, but we haven't really seen again Renslayer just yet in this season, so they might kind of leave it off until later episodes, to kind of have her big reveal, as well as with uh, he who remains, or Victor Timely, or Kang, that type of sort of thing. So
yeah.
we're not quite there yet with Jonathan Majors, the character that Jonathan Majors plays. This is the part where you're talking about the key lime pie. So this is where it kind of slows down. I kind of like this. I kind of like the fact that they were in
I
this kind of
was.
decor.
It was a good conversation. I appreciate that it slowed down. I was just my comment was that it wasn't fast because they slowed down to have this conversation, and I appreciated that it slowed down to have this conversation. They kind of take stock of who they are and what they want, and yeah, and kind of check in with each other, because I mean, like they really do make a good pair, and it seems like
Hmm.
he actually does care about. They actually do care about each other. So he's like checking in with him to see why he went off, whether or not he really doesn't want to know about what his life was about.
Hmm.
And he mentions this at the end of the last season too, because he was like, he says to Renslayer, maybe I had a jet ski. So at this point, he was at the end of this last season, he was curious, and now he's afraid. He says, because maybe he did have a good life, and if he had a good life, then he lost that good life. So
Right. Right.
it was a good conversation.
Yeah, and also
Yeah,
how you mentioned that he rather it be a bad life rather than it be
yeah,
like you said, be a good life. So yeah, I
right.
think I just like the whole vibe between the two, the chemistry between the two, but also just the effect here of all these are just key lime pies. I'm like, they're all pies. They're not.
Yeah,
There's
it's
not no other food
the
there.
the production design is fun,
Yeah, yeah.
and the show always
Yeah,
fun.
definitely. I mean, it's just a whole different decor, the vibe, the old school bureaucratic kind of officey type of decor.
Yeah,
So it's really really cool. They've really done a good job of it. Um, so you see here that we do see Ouroboros a little bit again. He's kind of busy throughout this episode trying to stabilize the temporal loom. Um,
yeah,
so there's a temporal meltdown that's actually imminent right now.
yeah.
And so trying to figure out how to kind of override the system block, but he needs Miss Minutes, but he can't really do it without Miss Minutes' help. But it seems as
Right.
though that Casey is there, to kind of help as well, because Casey is a big fan of Ouroboros. And so this never got resolved at the end of the episode, but it seems as though they're going to try to work together to kind of try to prevent the meltdown from happening.
This
Yeah.
didn't get resolved, but like you said, they did use Casey more here, because what the
Hmm.
reason that we brought Ouroboros back in is because X5 came with a temp pad that was modified, and he kind of lied about what the modification was.
Hmm.
Um, and Loki and it went down to OB. Loki and Mobius went down to OB, and OB was like, "Is this more important than than the loom?" And they're like, "No, no, no, work on that." And he gives them the guide. And they're trying to fix it themselves, and they can't figure it out. But we find out that Casey, he's like a devotee of this book, so he's able to figure out that X5 was lying about what the modification was.
Hmm.
So we learned that he's also very technically skilled, and like I said, the manual is like a bible to him. So
Right,
he's
exactly.
he's read it cover to cover, and actually got asked Obi for an autograph when he
Yeah,
met him. So
which I found very amusing. This kind of like this kind of like fan, big stand of for OB. So it's really cool
yeah,
that way.
yeah.
Um, So basically, X5, under kind of like torture scenes with him being in the box and almost cramped and
Yeah.
squished into the box, finally kind of relents and said, "Okay, I know where she is," and basically takes Mobius and Loki to Broxton, Oklahoma, is where Sylvie is located. Takes them both to the McDonald's that's there. So really cool. Again, like you said, Nathan, this is a branch timeline. In I think it was 1982. It was so
Hmm.
definitely the 80s decor is kind of they're trying to bring that back here, and trying to convince Sylvie to kind of get to try to stop everything from happening and stop the TVA from getting destroyed and stuff like that. But Sylvie's kind of
Hmm.
like pretty happy in her own world right now. She's kind
Yeah,
of
she gave people free will, right? She gave so people branches will happen now, and she's like, I gave people choices, and he's like he wanted to find her because he sees her in the future, and she's like that doesn't happen anymore. You can't. The future is not written. So
hmm
she's very skeptical. And she's also, like I said, happy because she's not running anymore from the TVA trying to kill her.
right.
So yeah, and then we have the other shoe drop that Brad he told him some information, but he was concealing other information because he seems very anxious to like leave this timeline, and then we find out why.
Yeah, and we get that scene right here. Brad's like kind of like, "What's I just want to leave. I want to leave." And then and Mobius would say, "So much earlier you were kind of at my throat and stuff like that. Now we're having food together. It's just such a change of dynamic." And yeah, he's right. It's almost like a meta type of thing where he was saying,
Yeah,
"Oh, we're at each other's throats, but now we're enjoying a meal." So yeah,
yeah.
and so my how things quickly change in just a short episode like this. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's pretty
Yeah,
awesome to kind of have that pointed out. Um, then they
yeah.
kind yep. Go ahead. Did you want to say something?
No, I was gonna say that then X5 explains that he wants to leave because all the he knows that the branch timeline is going to get pruned, and then they go after Docs in her hideout here.
Right. Right,
But
and basically they're trying to destroy. I mean, trying to prevent those bombs from going off, like you mentioned, Nathan, from the first episode when they had a lot of the hunters, the Minutemen. They were going to different time portals to kind of basically they were trying to prune all those other timelines, and we saw. There was a monitor that Hunter B-15 saw that they were actually pruning all the timelines, and it got to a point where it was pretty much almost all gone. And so it was kind of a very sad moment for B-15, realizing that a lot of lives are being lost because of this happening. And so
right.
they didn't really stop it fully from happening, but they kind of
Yeah, I feel like
stop. Yeah.
they said a good proportion of them. I don't know if it was like 60% or whatever. The bombs went off, so they did kill a bunch of people. So
Right.
yeah,
Right. Exactly.
like trillions of people because those branch timelines are not just like separate Earths; they're separate universes,
hmm
and they killed the entire universe off. So
Right.
yeah,
And we don't know and it's kind of open ended to kind of see. We don't know kind of like the consequences of this just yet. So there are still some threads that they didn't really answer, but it's kind of nice that they wrapped up some things here. But again, this is one of the things that we don't really know what's going to happen until we see further episodes. So it's good. It's kind of good setup, but it's not in a way where it's contrived. It's not in a way where it's like, oh my god, it's obviously a setup. They kind of
right.
it's kind of still within the story. So that was pretty interesting, and let the audience decide. Okay, is this kind of like kind of like wrapping some things up, or is it kind of a continuation of something instead
Mm-hmm.
of just like, oh, this is obviously a setup. And then finally, we see kind of like another slower, quieter moment where Sylvie's kind of like she's happy. She's happy where she's at. She doesn't want to, and she doesn't want to go back to fight with Loki and Mobius.
I
And
mean,
yeah.
I read this a different way though.
Oh,
Like
really?
I read this as she's thinking.
Hmm.
Like she's thinking about what happened. Like what we skipped over is that they stop as many as they could.
Mm-hmm.
Sylvie says that the problem is the TVA. There's a rot in the middle of it and then she leaves and goes back to her branch timeline. But at the very end, when that kid comes out, she's like touching on the temp pad. So that's the temp pad that she took from He Who Remains.
Mm.
And it looks like she's thinking. So I guess we'll see what she decides. But she's definitely mulling something over. It seems.
Well,
So
if that's the case, I think that brief scene that she was that was her in the future. Is that what you're saying? Like from the first episode?
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
okay. That makes sense. Okay.
She's definitely mulling something over. So I guess I know we're definitely going to see her later on because we saw her in the past, and then when we saw her in the past, that was the future. So we're definitely going to see her later on. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, that's pretty much all the screenshots that we've had and all we see. So, any kind of final thoughts about this episode?
No, I'm looking forward to the next episode. Hopefully they ramp up a little bit because I think this only has 6
Yeah.
episodes. So
Yeah.
yeah, hopefully by the midway point we have an understanding of where things are going because I know that Victor Timely is supposed to show up or which is one of the personas of Kang the Conqueror.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we should see him show up in the next episode, and I think he's going to show up in the fourth episode as well, after the reviews from the critics who actually got advanced copies, which wasn't us this round, are correct. So he should show up in the next couple episodes. So we should see another shift in the storytelling to
Okay.
focus on him.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So, if you like our conversation, again, please like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. And we will see you when we review the next episode of Loki. All right. Take it easy, everybody.